My name's Mark Gervais. I work for a company called Ningbo Shenzhou Knitting Company. We are an apparel manufacturer. We're one of the largest apparel manufacturers in China for knitwear. We work with a lot of major sports brands to do their apparel. Most of the very popular sports brands, I won't go into any specifics, but we do a high volume of apparel manufacturing, producing about 800,000 garments a day. Our print operation that we run has 55 automatic machines, about 7 kilometers a table. We produce roughly 400,000 images a day. So we are a high volume, high quality print operation. I've got about 40 years experience in screen printing, and most of that is all done with textile manufacturing. So they asked me to come today and talk to you guys about what I see on maybe where the textile screen print, where we're going, kind of the trends, where we see this developing. Of course, we see digital coming on very strong. I think with the screen printing combined with digital, and you can see here at the show there's a few people combining screen print and digital together at the same time. And I think this is really going to be the hybrid technology that we're going to see the print evolution. Digital offers a lot of things that cannot really be done that well with screen printing, and of course screen printing can do the things that digital cannot. So I think what we're going to see in the next few years is a hybrid machine where we're combining both of those technologies into a common solution so that we get the best of both technologies. And that's probably the trend. I mean, you can already see it here in the show today. There's a few people with automatic machines or even manual machines combining those two technologies. From a brand perspective, we work with a lot of the major sports brands. Just to kind of give you a little idea of where they're taking things, is a lot of what they do is in material development. So they're looking for more high performance materials, materials that either have a cooling effect, a warming effect. I mean, they want some kind of performance characteristic out of these materials. And as screen printers, we should study our substrate. So what we end up doing is we're having to examine these types of materials that they're developing at different yarn constructions, different material contents, different finishes on the materials that have some sort of performance enhancing characteristic. So then our challenges come from understanding that substrate, what it can do, what it can't do, knowing what we have available in terms of ink and all the specialty effects that they want to apply, and not everything works on their fabrics. So what we're seeing from a brand perspective is, sure, there's some people that still sell big, heavy, graphic embellishments where it's really an illustration type of a graphic that goes on to these garments. Still, a lot of it is still simple logo, very highly polished, very clean embellishment techniques that are done with the logo. More of the garments are more of a high-tech garment where there's some sort of compression fitting or using bonding or some other high technical type of features in the garment, in the apparel, and they want to complement that with some high-end type of embellishment treatment. So we're seeing a lot of trends towards metallics and iridescence and reflectives, and a lot of more of these high-tech looking embellishment treatments for when they need to do simple logo decoration. So the brands are pushing more towards technical garments with more technical type fabrics, and those fabrics really need to be studied carefully so we can understand, as I say, what they can do and what they can't do. Synthetics are very, popular. We're not always printing on cotton. Seems like polyesters, and the way that they've treated these polyesters for more of a wicking or a cooling. They also offer a lot of challenges to us as printers. As an example, you're working with a cotton poly fabric that has a wicking or a cooling effect. Well, when you put your inks onto the fabric, it wants to start pulling either a plasticizer or water, and it starts to wick with your inks. And that offers challenges for us as printers when we're on the machine or even printing manually. So a lot of what we do is we work on, we of course are a material developer, so we work closely with the brands in the material development, but we also have to understand in working with our ink companies, what are the different inks and the different properties of the inks that need to be there so that it will work onto these fabrics. From a machinery standpoint, again, I touch on the fact that we're going to see evolutions where we're combining the hybrids of digital and traditional screen printing together. They do offer unique solutions for both of what technology and what they offer. We're starting to see some real high resolution printing, and I don't know what is encouraging that. Maybe because they're trying to compete with digital to show people that screen printing really can be high definition, high resolution. You can see here at the show there are some booths that have some very spectacular high resolution textile printed images, and traditionally over the years that was never considered the best type of a substrate to get high resolution imagery. But now with the I wouldn't say the invention, but with the progress of the better ink systems, water-based ink systems that are able to go through finer meshes, we can go to higher dot counts. The screen systems are available now with computer to screen. We're finding that we can push our limits of resolution up even higher. Years ago, 55, 60 lines, 50 dots per inch was considered relatively good resolution for textile imagery, but now we're finding 80, 90 dots per inch seem to be very achievable, and it's not too difficult. With the progression of the ink systems, they're becoming more friendly. The screen systems, all the things that have been working together over the years have reached a level where it's easier for all of us now to achieve a much higher resolution image onto a textile fabric. Again, specialty inks always seem to be a big push. I get asked all the time, every year by all the brands, what do you have for innovation? And not always are the ink companies releasing new inks. I mean, we've seen the photochromics, we've seen thermochromics, we've seen hydrochromic. I mean, that's come and gone. Fluorescents always move around. They're very popular now. Iridescence, colored reflectives, things like this. They're always looking for these new specialty type inks. We're being asked commonly for reflective, colored reflective. And there's different ways that you can achieve reflective embellishment, but it seems like a colored reflective seems to be very, very sought after. And there's some ways that we can simulate that by combining clear beads with coated beads and then adding a little bit of pigment to try and create a colored reflective, but still it has its own unique challenges. So when we talk about the industry, we think of the customers and the brands. We think of what's happening with equipment. We think about what's happening with the inks. And after we've talked about that, then we need to start talking about our processes. So the apparel company that I work for is in China, and years ago, a lot of people came to China to do apparel manufacturing because it seemed the labor rates were very attractive, low labor rates, but that's not the case anymore. I've been living there for 10 years, and in those 10 years, the labor rates have steadily increased to where now we're really looking at automation and automating these processes where never before would you consider a company in China investing into automatic folding equipment. Well, now the time has come because the labor rates are high enough to where we need to consider automation at a lot of different levels. So we're looking at systemizing, linearizing, automating a lot of the production operations to minimize the handling. Because anytime you're handling things, you're adding cost without value. So we're putting forth some initiatives to build what would be considered factory of the future. So changing the way we look at the way you take fabric from a roll, put that on a cutting table, from the cutting table to the printing, from printing to sewing. How can we linearize that whole operation? Because traditionally it's all been batch processing where you spread material and you cut it and you send that material out and that's sent out and then it's printed and then it comes back and then it has to be matched up with the other parts. So as a company, we're looking at trying to design things to where we're incorporating the automation. So again, we can bring down the labor that's required to make these garments. Everyone seems to chase where the next lower labor rate country is going to be, and I don't think there's any more places left. I mean, I think Africa could be an interesting opportunity, but in Southeast Asia, it's all been done. I mean, we as a company have a big operation in China, but we also have some operation in Cambodia and also in Vietnam. But I mean, the labor rates can only get so low, but I think what's going to help from a textile manufacturing position is automating, even in the pre-press. From the time an order comes in, how that whole order is processed, the automation of the whole order entry system, how that information flows out to the pattern departments, to the department that's spreading or cutting the material, and how all that's linked together so that we can minimize that, so we can become more efficient. These are the challenges that we have as an apparel manufacturer. So we're seeing trends. I mean, from our position, we're a large volume, but we're also seeing trends everywhere. We're automating, and you can walk around the show here and see all types of different equipment that's incorporating automation into it, be it pick and place or automated in the sewing, pick and place, either putting material onto a press or taking material off of a press. Automation seems to be an area where there's a lot of opportunity to save. So, you know, as a large manufacturer, what I see are technical trends in the embellishment, more high-tech looking things, textures such as carbon fiber and some other more interesting textures that are going into the surfaces of the ink. Either we're printing a texture through like a high density or raised printing that's done with different types of structures. There's artwork structures that can be produced photographically. There's textures that can be produced in the printing technique where we're stacking ink on top. And there's taking things like release papers and actually taking an ink that's been printed and then pressing a texture into that ink. So again, that creates a more high-tech looking imagery. By taking an ink that has a nice smooth finish and then pushing a texture such as carbon fiber or other really interesting textural images that come from either things they use for shoes. This is another thing. A lot of the apparel companies are shoe manufacturers. So they're trying to take the images and the textures and things that are created in shoes and then bring that onto the embellishment onto the garment. So how we're able to translate things from a footwear perspective and how we bring that onto apparel. A lot of the sportswear manufacturers are trying to link apparel and footwear together. This is where you see a lot of the reflective inks and a lot of the fluorescence. Now shoes are starting to use knit, knit structures in the top of the shoes. So it's a knitted upper. A lot of the upper in the footwear are now looking at digital. Digital on footwear is a pretty interesting field. So now we're starting to look at the shoe as a platform for carrying the graphics, where we looked at only on garments. Now the shoes have become an area where they want to populate that with the images. So, so the things I see are the apparel companies keep growing. There's some new players that come on the scene, but they're all kind of doing something quite similar. They're putting logos, they're putting images, and how do they differentiate? How do they set themselves apart from the other apparel companies or sportwear companies? And a lot of that's done with the graphic. Sometimes they get very clever with the graphic. Sometimes it's a printing technique. Sometimes it's the ink combined with all of that. So how we sit and work with the designers and the developers, it's a very important process. So investing in your product development for the screen printing is an area where it's a good dollar to spend in the development, because what you spend there working with your customers as a service, looking at a two-dimensional graphic on a piece of paper, and how do you bring that to life through the color separations, through the films, through the screens, through the inks, and how you reassemble that image and you create this dynamic graphic with either the special effects in the inks or the printing technique or even in the graphic. This is where we spend a lot of our energy in working with the designers and the developers on the front end. That's what starts to give them an edge, starts to give them a little more uniqueness. So we're constantly working with ink suppliers to see what they have available. We also look into the automotive industry and some of the other industrial coatings, because a lot of things that come from the automotive industry in terms of paints and finishes and pearlescence and color shifting and color changing things, those can be adopted, they can be adapted into screen printing inks. So not always will you come to a show and see something new in terms of an ink, but what we're doing is we're trying to work with ink companies and developing some specialty inks, newer than what we've seen over the years. I mean, we're trying to work with new ways of taking other industrial compounds and coatings and incorporate that into something that can be put onto a garment. A lot of these big apparel sportswear brands have certain requirements in terms of restricted substance, be heavy metals or formaldehydes and things. And of course, all that has to be taken into consideration in something that we actively pursue when we're qualifying any type of an ink or any type of a coating or a process. That has to meet all the requirements. The other challenges come from the wash fastness. There's a lot of things that we can do that are printable and they pass all the types of chemical compliance issues, but in terms of wash fastness, this is another area where everything has to perform equally. In fact, this is where we see a lot of the digital challenges for apparel decoration. Maybe not so much on the all-over printing or yardage printing, but on specific spot printing for digital. Depending upon the wash requirement, we're finding challenges on the wash fastness. Some of that's due to the pre-treatment, some of that's due to the curing. And as we all investigate the digital solution, we understand that studying your substrate becomes very important so that you can create the correct pre-treatment that works with the fabric, that works with the inks and everything that needs to happen. And then the performance, the post-finishing, so that the performance, the wash result, is really a big unit of measure for performance. A lot of the digital effect is spectacular and beautiful, but it's for our challenges on sportswear, the graphic durability seems to be our biggest challenge. There are so many different substrates, there are so many different fiber contents, knit structures, finishing, hydrophobic, hydrophilic, all these things are going on to these fabrics that we're being asked to print. And that all has to work. You have to engineer a pre-treatment to work with the fabric and the way it's been processed, and then the inks that go on there, and then the post-finishing. So it's, although it might be easy on the front end to get the printed result, there's a lot of science and engineering that goes into the pre-treatment and post-treatment. So as that moves forward and we're combining digital on traditional screen printing equipment, the chemistry involved on pre-treatment, inks, and post-treatment becomes a big area of technological challenges for all of us, the ink manufacturers, the equipment manufacturers, because at the end of the day, it's really the after wash result that determines whether or not the result is acceptable or not. I know Martin's going to be speaking next, and he has some things to talk about on digital that he can shed a lot more light onto. We have a limited amount of digital in our operation. Everything is pretty much traditional direct to fabric screen printing, but we are looking at digital as an all over fabric solution as well as spot embellishment. Um, so that's really all I don't have a big PowerPoint display. I was just trying to talk about trends and things that I see in the industry. Screen print is still strong because, as we point out, screen print can do things digital cannot. We can do curved surfaces. We can do 3D raised images. There's a lot of things that can be screen printed. And by changing maybe some of the digital print heads and the size of the openings, maybe we could start to spray some of these other specialty inks or these particle inks, things that have a larger micron in terms of their sizes. I know they do a lot of industrial coatings that are applied digitally, and even applying some antimicrobial or anti-odor type finishes that typically go on to all over fabric, rather than coating that all on the fabric. Just putting that in strategic locations and being to apply that digitally is going to make it a more sustainable process. Makes it more sustainable because we're not putting that material everywhere on the fabric. It's only going into the areas that are required for the locations. Taking digital to another level of sustainability would be to only digitally print the cut pieces. So we're not printing the whole fabric, we're only printing in the areas, and then later we'd be cutting. So imagine taking a marker and marry the marker with the digital image so that you're only printing in the areas that you need to. So you're saving ink, so you're not applying ink everywhere. And the fabric that is not printed is then much more easy to recycle and reuse. So trying to even elevate the level of sustainability by only putting ink in the areas that we need and leaving the fabric not printed so it's easier to recycle. So we see trends in terms of improving sustainability, trends in terms of more efficiency, trends towards more automation, systemization, linearizing everything. So that just makes us more productive and getting it right first time, which as we all know, saves money for the operation. So really I just have kind of a short little thing on kind of where I see the industry moving, where it's been, where it's moving. And I thank you for your time.